Dallas Mavericks are the gift that keeps on giving here on Basketball Gospel. A team demonstrating everything not to do. I just love it. Anthony Davis has said publicly that he expects to be traded. There's also been a report that the Chicago Bulls have had internal discussions about Anthony Davis and have decided at this time that they're not going to do it. We'll get to the Bulls later. Why would you want to trade him at this time if you're Dallas? At Davis's lowest value and at your lowest negotiating power. You're having an awful season. If you're looking to move Davis, other teams know it's because you're desperate and that you're just looking to pick a new direction, and basically you're cutting your losses. If the motivation is to tank and just make your record this season as poor as possible, I think that's a huge mistake. Tanking gets glorified in NBA circles, in the media, and among fans. And I think that what people have to keep in mind is that tanking looks great and the decisions are really easy, right? If you decide you're going to tank, you can trade your assets for returns that are just unproven players and unproven picks. All these things where you don't even know their value, but it's looked at as a smart trade because you're tanking, right? You feel like you've already been guaranteed some sort of future value, even though you haven't been. I speculated in my recent episode about Nico Harrison getting fired that this may be the start of a fire sale. But when I talked about a fire sale, I talked about everybody except Kyrie and Anthony Davis. I don't think it makes much sense at all to trade Anthony Davis. I thought it made sense to trade a lot of these guys on the team, guys like Caleb Martin, Klay Thompson, if you can find a taker for him, PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford. Trade those guys, sure, thin out the rotation a bit, because you can go about building the team next offseason based on what your draft pick looks like, based on what the rest of Cooper Flagg's season looks like, based on Kyrie's progress. You'll have more intel next offseason. You can tank by thinning out the rotation rather than making a massive move and accepting a paltry return for Davis. To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So what that means, I believe, is that Dallas went to Davis and said, we want to shut you down for most of the year. Davis doesn't want to do that. He's 32. He's only got so many years of his career left to play in the NBA. He's not interested in sitting just because you want a better draft pick. He wants to play. And so if you don't want him to play, you're going to have to trade him. None of us have any idea of what's going on behind closed doors here, but based on what we've seen come out in the media and what I consider to be sound logic for what Dallas would be interested in doing, I can't see how trading Davis makes much sense at all because of their lack of negotiating power. I'm not taking a player as good as Davis and just accepting a horrible return. The only time that really happens is if the player forces the trade. That's the only explanation that makes sense to me. Before we get into the actual trades that I have in mind here, I think it's important to consider a few things. Number one, the Luka trade should be considered a sunk cost. Luka's gone. That shouldn't impact your decision-making at all, because this is a completely new situation with different variables. I know that the team is probably worried about the kind of media attention they're going to get once everybody puts all the pieces together when the dust settles. They're going to say, you traded Luka for Max Christie and 3 bad firsts and whatever else they end up getting in the Davis trade. But that shouldn't impact the Mavericks' thinking at all. And the second is that whenever trades happen in the NBA, the fans and the media alike both love to pick winners and losers. That's pretty much the immediate thing that people are asked when a trade goes down, is who won the trade. And they're comparing on-paper value of the players and the picks. I don't think teams see it that way. I think teams see it as, we're in a situation that we don't like. We want to go in a different direction. And so this trade helps set up that direction. Yeah, we're taking a bit of a haircut value-wise, but that's because we're not in a position to get value for value. Sometimes it's the opposite, and you are in a position to get tremendous value, more than you're giving up. But in a case like this, if you're Dallas and you're making this move, you have to ask yourself, what do I want out of this? And to me, if you're looking to tank, and I'm already going to take a haircut on this Davis deal, I'd better at least be getting set up financially to move forward, smoothly. I would love for you to take on a contract that I'm going to have trouble moving, i.e. Klay Thompson. I think they're going to have a hard time moving him. I would love to get under the first apron. I would love to get under the tax. Do that for me if I'm not going to get good players and good picks from you. And I don't think they're going to get good players and good picks in this deal for Anthony Davis if they do indeed move forward with trading him. But with that, let's get into the actual trades I think make sense. I don't think finding an Anthony Davis suitor is easy. You can throw out any contender. Nobody like the Cleveland I've seen thrown out there, New York, none of them are going to move one of their or two of their highly paid players to acquire Anthony Davis. If you have a team that's already set up to make a deep playoff run, you're not going to acquire a risky asset like Anthony Davis and risk that deep run that you already are well set up for. So you can throw out all those teams. The teams that are going to trade for Anthony Davis are the ones that are looking to make a leap. We want to make a second round or further, acquire a player like Davis. Maybe you get lucky, get a couple of rounds out of him of good health. And now you're in a good spot to go into the offseason, maybe one or two moves away from being a conference finals contender. And as long as you're in that ballpark, then anything can happen. So that would be the motivation here for Davis. Not to mention, again, his value is at his lowest. Some opportunistic team is going to take advantage of this if Dallas is truly interested in moving him. So I have three teams here that I think are interesting. The first is the LA Clippers. The Clippers are in a situation where they have a few years here where they cannot rebuild, and that's why they loaded up on so many veterans. They're trying to raise their ceiling as much as possible. And I thought they had a good shot at that this year. Start of the year has been awful, and their pick goes to OKC, which is an absolute disaster if it ends up being a very high pick. So they have all the incentive in the world to try to take a big swing and make sure that they at least are in playoff contention. And so an Anthony Davis trade would make a lot of sense. Why am I going to accept a package from the Clippers? Because I am convinced that the Clippers are going to be bad 5-6 years from now, really bad, and I want their picks. That's why you would take this Clippers package over any other. I think it would be Anthony Davis for John Collins, Bogdanovich, Jones Jr., and a fourth player, plus only one pick. But again, that pick might be good. Bogdanovich is flippable. You can find a contender to give you a protected first for Bogdanovich. Same goes for Jones Jr. He's an asset that a lot of teams would be interested in. And then Collins is, that money's coming off the books. So it's actually not as bad of a deal as it may seem at first. You just clear this Anthony Davis money off your books entirely. You get maybe as many as 3 firsts in return, one of which being a Clippers pick that could be really juicy in a few years. That's not that bad. So I wanted to include that. I think that's realistic. I think the Clippers are a team that would be very much interested in bringing Davis in. I think he would love to play there, going back to LA, playing next to a big like Zubats, which he obviously prefers to do. That's one option. The next option, it's been talked about a lot, the Chicago Bulls. You can't just be content being the 8, 9, 10 seed every year, which they've been for multiple years in a row. You made an awesome Josh Giddey trade. Good for them for doing that. You now have a building block, but he's a number 2. You need a best player to go along with him. And if the price is right for Davis, I think you should go for it. But they could also exercise some patience if they want to. Their team is relatively young. But the reason that I would do it now is because they have a lot of these expiring contracts they acquired in recent trades with the Spurs and the Kings. And this is an opportunity to exchange all of those for a big contract. They also have some extra picks. So they're in probably the best position to make this deal. The trade I have on that I came up with for this is Zach Collins, an $18 million expiring, Kevin Huerter, a guy that the Mavericks can flip pretty easily. Everybody likes shooters on their team. Kobe White is a good asset. He's still pretty young. They have this Portland pick this upcoming year. It's protected 1 to 14. And then you can include an extra pick at some point, like 2028, something like that. I would be okay making this deal if I was Chicago. So that's the return for Anthony Davis there. The last team, the team that I actually think makes the most sense, is the Miami Heat. They have the young players and big contracts and picks to trade whatever the Mavericks want. And I think that he would love to play next to Bam Adebayo. They have a history together playing on the Olympic team. I think that Davis is a good fit there. But the most important reason I like Miami for this is because if I'm Dallas, as I said, I want to dump Klay Thompson. And he has no value on this team. I don't want that $17 million on my books next season. I would love to just unload him now. Miami makes a lot of sense for Klay Thompson. I could see Klay fitting in well there. So I have 2 iterations of this deal depending on what Dallas would want. Do they want Norman Powell or do they want Andrew Wiggins? So let's start with the Wiggins package. Wiggins has another year after this one for $28 million. That's not a bad contract at all. You can definitely flip him if you're Dallas. You can also play him alongside Cooper Flagg. You can take this Terry Rozier contract. It's a big expiring $26 million. And then I threw a young player in, Pelle Larsson, and then a 2029 first. I think the combination of a good starter like Andrew Wiggins, a flippable contract, a big expiring, and a young player plus a future first is all that the Mavericks are going to ask for, and that's what I have here coming to them from Miami. The second iteration, this deal, again, if it's Powell instead of Wiggins, would be Fontecchio and Powell swapped in there for Wiggins. You unload Klay Thompson, you include Dwight Powell in this contract as well. It puts them in a really nice place financially. You get that future Miami pick. I think this is the best deal for them. It looks like a bunch of garbage, but again, I'm not going to expect very much in an Anthony Davis trade if you're trading him this season. His value is very low. Your negotiating strength as a team is very low. So again, I kind of disagree with trading him right now in the first place. If you are going to trade him, you better get yourself in a good financial position and make sure that this trade accomplishes some things for you beyond just making your team worse. Again, I think teams get too enamored with this decision-making that goes along with tanking, where we can make trades that make us worse, and that's actually a smart thing to do. Those trades don't take a lot of creativity. They basically just let GMs off the hook, and I think that's why so many engage in tanking as a strategy in the first place. If I were Dallas, I would make other moves. I would look to keep Anthony Davis, and your record falls wherever it falls. I mean, look how it worked out for them this year. They lost, or this past season, they lost out of the play-in, and they end up with the #1 overall pick. Now, that's highly unusual. They got extremely lucky. But my point is, I don't think nosediving a season where you're trying to foster the growth of your face, your new face of the franchise, Cooper Flagg, I don't think that's a sound strategy at all. But if you do make a move, this Miami move at least puts you in a great financial position going forward, where your books are clean. You can now make some other moves. The Dallas Mavericks are just a reminder of how quickly things can change in the NBA. This Luka trade they made is this black cloud over the organization that they're trying to wipe away, and they're going to make some trades in order to move on, in order to tell their fans it's time to move on. If you're following the 10 commandments of team building, the point is to keep your team at a competitive level for as many years as possible. And I think the Mavericks aren't far removed from being a competitive team. They just need to sort out their roster a bit. And if they go ahead and clear the decks, it's going to be a long wait before they're back up there, despite a player as exciting as Cooper Flagg.